All right, what's up, y'all? It's Wooly here. So today we're going to talk about should you play DC Universe Online in 2024, wrapping up 2023. There's a lot to cover. So what I want to start with is there are some of these, bigger YouTubers that don't really play the game that will come back and revisit the game. Most of the time what you see with these videos is just the beginning tutorial, right? They're leveling and they're just giving you their impressions. Now that's not a true representation of what the game is like. So as somebody who has played this game for years and years, and what most people will tell you, there's really a lot to learn. There is a steep learning curve when you really get into it and when you really start pushing. So I want to kind of highlight the features that somebody who is into MMOs would actually look for. No, not just the casual gamer, right? This is a very casual game at its heart, but there is a lot of stuff that you can get into. Whether you want to be a complete solo player, you can absolutely do that, and I will highlight some of the things that you'll need to do to really make the most out of it. And if you really want to be social, hey, it's an MMO, so you know, plenty of that. So first things first, I'm not going to talk about leveling. I've got videos on that. There's tons of videos on that, right? So what I want to talk to you about is what you can actually look to get into. Now, typically we get a new episode is what they're called. That's a DLC or expansion. So we get a new one of those about every 5 to 6 months, and it highlights a new area, new story, right? And it will always be found in the latest tier, always going down. It will be the last one. Okay. Now, DC has really tried to streamline the game as far as the UI, and recently the character customization menu. We've got a new character creation menu. So when you first boot up and you start your character, you've got a sleek new design on that. But they've streamlined the UI here to make it more presentable, I guess, and just easier to kind of understand. It don't take very long. It won't take very long to figure it out, right? So the latest episodes will always be on the latest tier at the very bottom, right? And the same thing with the alerts. Now, alerts are the four-mans. Those are like dungeons and other games, is what you would call them, instances. And then the raids, of course, are raids. It's an 8-man raid. Then you got solos, of course. You got duos. Okay. Um, and then we do have a lot of events that we have throughout the year. We have seasonal events. There's the Valentine's, there's a spring event, there's the summer event, um, there's the Save the Universe event, which goes on for, I think, usually 6 weeks, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. Um, there's the homecoming event, there's the um, Halloween event, the winter event. So there's a lot of seasonal stuff. They're not very exciting, but they do offer some nice rewards. One of the things that the seasonal events do is they bring a lot of new styles and base items, and the styles are typically the big draw for a lot of people. So you can get some horns here, you know. Um, so there is a lot of stuff to collect. There's also a lot of base items. So I think it used to be level 10. I believe it's level 20 now when you get your base and you can set it up. And people do like to decorate their bases from time to time. It's not something that you'll spend a lot of time on every day unless you're into that. But once in a while, you may want to actually go and decorate your base. And you can take a look at one of my bases here that I've taken the time to kind of decorate in a nature theme. So there's a lot of nature stuff. Most of the stuff comes from the summer and spring event. right? So there's a lot of cool stuff. Enchanted waterfall. So those are a couple of things for casual gamers, or if you're just bored and want something to do, you can decorate a base. Get a lot of base items. Like I said, the seasonal events, they're not very fun to do, to be quite honest. They're very short, but the main draw is the styles that they bring to enhance your aesthetic and the base items. On top of that, they do offer feats, of course, and that's something that we can talk about here in a little bit. So there's a lot of events happening in between the episodes. And then the episodes themselves. Now, this is one thing I kind of want to talk about here, because when it comes to DC, of course, is an MMO. So as you start to progress and as you start to level up, you're going to want to focus on a specific role. Now, obviously, every power has two roles: the DPS and then support role. Now, support roles are healer, tank, and then what DC has is controller, which is the crowd controller, or as people just call it in the game, troll. Now, what the crowd controller does, that has changed a lot since this game's inception. Um, Typically, you push power. That blue bar that you see in the top left corner under my green bar is the health. The blue bar is power, which you would call mana in other games. Now, being a troll requires a lot of work nowadays, depending on how far you want to get into it. Obviously, if you're going to be a hardcore player, you're going to be looking to be a buff troll in that instance, or a battle troll. But typically, buff trolls are what are really highest in demand when it comes to being a serious raider. Um, that really entails buffing the group's damage, so to speak. So you'll buff the DPS, right? You will be buffing their might or their precision. Now, might is damage that comes from powers, like so. Okay. And then precision is damage that comes from weapons, right? And on top of that, you will also be responsible for debuffing enemies and then maintaining power to the group. Okay. Now, that is a bit of a learning curve for anybody who has never played controller. Probably not the first support role you're going to go for, but it can be very fun. It can be very engaging. It just requires a lot of work. Um, and then obviously healer, your main job is to just keep people alive. And then tank. Now, tank is an interesting one because it really depends on what you're running. If you are just running standard content, right? Like if I go into Omnibus, Omnibus is just a collection of all events, or sorry, all episodes. It's for all past episodes, including the new ones. But with the past episodes, um, it just allows everybody to run it at the same level, unless, of course, you're not at that level, in which case you won't be capped and maxed when you go into it. But otherwise, you will be. So let's say you look at my level, I'm 430, right? Now, if I go in and I run Omnibus and I get queued into, a tier 3, the recommended combat rating, which is your level, is 100. Okay, so I would be at the maximum of what that is, which I'm assuming is probably going to be around 105 or 110. I don't remember. But that's what I'm going to scale down to. Okay, now when you're doing standard content like that through Omnibus, if you're a tank, it doesn't really matter too much. You can face tank, as we call it, which means you can literally stand in front of the boss and just continue to hold his aggro. Now, again, there is a learning curve. like any role, you'll need to learn how to grab aggro, maintain aggro, learn not to overpull the ads or the boss, the ads or the trash mobs, because you can make them immune and then they will leave you and turn their attention to the group. And that's not a good thing because trash mobs, even though they're fodder, uh, they can be the difference between a successful raid and just a wipe, right? So these are things you will learn over time as you play. Now, why I say it really depends on what you run, and of course this goes for any role, but it greatly differs for tank because in regular content you can face tank stuff. Um, you don't have to worry about moving around a whole lot, right? When you go into the elite content, at least the elite raids as the tank, uh, generally you'll do more kiting, right? You're going to be kiting a lot more, moving around. So you'll still pull the boss, you'll still maintain their aggro, but you won't always be able to stand there and take those hits because they hit so hard. So you'll have to move around a little bit so that they can't continuously pound on you. You can take the hit as a tank, but you need to learn to move and not continuously get hit. There's a lot of other variables, which is something that we can kind of talk about. And this isn't specific to just the tank, but the tank, of course, like any MMO, is responsible for maintaining the field. So generally, when you get into these higher instances, when you start running the harder stuff like Elite, most people that you get into the groups with are probably going to know what they're doing. Um, So they're going to know the mechanics. They're going to know what to look out for and what not to look out for. Now, that's not always the case, but when you start to run these elite raids over and over and over again, you'll start to see the same people. You'll start to run with the same group of people. So you get very comfortable with them. Even if it's not your own league, um, you'll start to see the same people over and over again, right? And you'll run raids with them consistently, and that's always good. That builds good rapport because they can always call on you when they need help, or you can always call on them when you need help and you need to fill a spot in the group, right? Um, so generally, most people that you are familiar with know how to do the raid, but as a tank, um, there's certain call outs that you would want to do, especially if you're not familiar with the group. But these are things that you'll learn each time you go into the raid. So when you're on the boss, if a red skull pops over his head, some kind of mechanic is about to happen. And there's always a tell. Generally, some bosses will, make a taunting gesture like "come at me," with the skull over their head, or they'll raise their hand. But whenever they do the skull, a mechanic's fixing to happen. And when you get into the elite content, generally there's several mechanics that the boss will perform. And depending on the gesture he makes, he's going to do a certain mechanic, right? And that's when you'll know to block. You'll know to call out to everyone that they need to block or they need to move, things like that. So it can be very engaging. It can be very fun. Um, Depending on the skill level of the group, it can be challenging. But once you get it down, you can generally fly through it pretty easily. Now, that basically covers the roles for the most part outside of DPS. DPS is pretty much DPS. You're going to be dealing damage, right? Damage per second. Now, there's many ways that you can run a DPS. There is a lot of room for different builds. Now, a lot of people at the higher level do run precision, which is your weapons, and that tends to hit the hardest. Um, but you can supplement that as might with certain artifacts that will buff certain attributes, right? Um, Now, here's the thing. Here's kind of what I want to talk about as far as getting to the hardcore player base here when it comes to artifacts. So standard, your artifacts start at 0, and you need to level them up with nth metal, which is this right here. And you also need catalyst when you want to level your artifact. So let's say I want to continue leveling my Philosopher's Stone. You can see here I'm going to need these catalysts, and I'm going to need more nth to level it up, right? And how you get your catalyst, you've got to get source marks. How you get your source marks, you've got to run content, right? You can also buy these out of the broker generally. And as you start to scan the broker, you'll get familiar with the prices, right? But when it comes to DPS, I don't want to deviate too much and get off topic here. So when it comes to DPS, it does offer a certain degree of skill and a certain degree of challenge. So speaking to the hardcore, I'm not speaking to the casual here, speaking to the hardcore, somebody that's interested in playing and wants to be a DPS, you're going to want multiple artifacts because you can only hold 3, but you'll typically want to put 1 down here that you can swap in and out, right? So while you're in mid-combat, you would swap this in, you would swap this in, you would swap this in. You swap them in and out to proc them specifically for what they're used, because there's a lot of artifacts that offer a lot of additional benefits, but they're not necessarily something that you want to keep on full time, right? They offer certain things that are specific to, let's say, summoning your pets here. So if I want to summon my henchman or trinket, now they're going to summon with this green shield because I used mercy, and that protects them, but it also, they get a slight damage buff out of it. And it just significantly increases the overall damage that you will do because your pets stay alive longer. They hit harder, right? And the same thing with this right here. Your Dead King Scepter. You can see all the stuff that it does, and a lot of people like to swap this in and out, in and out, in and out. So these are the type of artifacts you won't generally keep on very often, but you do swap them in to use them, okay? So that is something that does require a little more knowledge and something that you would have to get used to doing, and specifically learning what artifacts do what. But typically you jump in, you start asking, hey, what artifact should I be running? People are going to tell you. When you want to know what artifacts you should be swapping, you'll get the hang of that pretty quickly because most people, like I said, will tell you. And there's plenty of videos out there. I've made quite a few videos on it. A lot of people make videos on it. You can go through, watch gameplay videos, and see how people are swapping their artifacts. Okay, so that is something that is going to speak more to the hardcore player base that wants to really be a sweaty DPS. Okay, and that can be very fun and engaging. Now, obviously, the biggest draw for DC, as far as being a 12-year-old MMO, is the combat system. Okay, so let's go take a look at it, because overall, the combat system in this game is still one of the more fun combat systems I've played in any game, let alone any MMO. That's why I can't get down with something like Final Fantasy 14. The combat is absolutely boring. I can't do with it. I can't deal with it. It's too boring for me. But something like this is very engaging. You're always on the move. It's very fast. And one of the things that DC does offer is clipping, where you can clip out of your animation. So if I was to do my brawling weapon mastery like this, I can clip out of it by hitting a power And all that means is that I stop the animation, but I still get the damage from it. I still get the benefit, right? So the combat can be super fun, pretty much. Um, and that's the biggest draw for DC is the combat is super fun. And like I said, there's many ways that you can be a DPS and play, but a lot of it does involve a lot of work. So even though DPS may be the most common role in the game, not everybody is a good DPS. I would say there's probably about 10% of the base, player base, maybe, that is really up there in terms of damage, right? Um, I know a lot of good DPS that have 200 artifacts, and then I know a lot of great DPS that have multiple artifacts and would wipe them off the board, right? Myself included. I consider myself a bit of a sweat sometimes, but even I will get absolutely wiped by some of these guys that I run with. So you're not always going to be the top, but you can try. And that's the big thing as far as being a DPS. It's all about the competition. You should always be in competition. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't do the mechanics. You should absolutely do the mechanics. You should pick that person up next to you when they go down. But there's a lot of room for competition, which can really, really make it very fun and engaging. And that's what you want to aim for, is that fun. So that is what DC offers in terms of playing, right? Um, there are a lot of complaints and stuff like that, but it's nothing that's completely game breaking. Overall, like I said, this is a 12-year-old MMO. It's currently owned by EG7, who purchased Daybreak, which is a holding company, I believe. But we did get the graph recently, which showed all of their IPs. This includes things like EverQuest, Planet Side 2, and DC is by far, at least by a 60% margin or more, the biggest earner financially for them. So it's not going anywhere anytime soon. They make a lot of money. People spend a lot of money on this game. Um, so if you're worried about jumping into it, you don't think it's going to stick around, it's not going anywhere. Okay. Now, that being said, when you first log in, you're going to be greeted with this welcome screen, and I'll show you. So you're going to be greeted with this, and it looks like it just wants you to buy a bunch of crap, right? So automatically you're thinking, wow, this is a pay-to-win game. Now, it can be, but it also doesn't have to be, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you buy as many artifacts as you want. It's not going to make you a good DPS. It's not going to make you a good tank. It's not going to make you a good healer. Those artifacts are there to supplement your skill. They are not your skill, right? You still have to learn how to play the game. You still have to be a skilled player in order to get through a lot of this stuff. And you don't really ever have to spend a dime. There's a lot of guides out there. Like I said, I've made plenty of guides on leveling your artifacts. I have one that came out not too long ago. I think I put out within the last 6 months. That's still relevant as far as leveling your artifacts. And I think it's pretty much easier now than it's ever been to level your artifacts. So if that's something that you're interested in, I do have a video on leveling your artifacts, and I'll try to link it in the description. So it can just kind of give you some helpful tips if you are going to be starting this game, okay, or returning, whatever the case is. So you can completely get through this game without ever spending a dime. I mean, at most, you would probably want to spend the $5, so you're not completely free. You get the premium, is what it's called, and that does allow you to have no longer have an escrow. You won't have a cap on how much cash you can have at that time. You'll have unlimited access. There's certain features you'll get from just making a one-time purchase of at least $5, I believe, is the minimum, and that unlocks premium, and that gives you some benefit. It's not the same as being a full-fledged member where you subscribe every month. Okay, so you can play this game completely free. I would, at minimum, recommend spending the $5. Okay, so however you want to do that, there's many ways to do that. I mean, you can actually just, I'm just going to say it might be against TOS, but you can actually sell stuff to somebody for like a PlayStation card. Just don't scam. Never scam. But there's ways you can get stuff for free without ever like spending a dime. Like I said, I've got a lot of guides, not necessarily talking about breaking the terms of service, but I got a lot of guides on doing stuff specifically in game that'll get you to where you need to be. Okay. There's also a lot of build guides out there, specific to your role, specific to your power, that you can check out. So all the help you need is out there on YouTube. Um, so yeah, DC offers quite a bit of versatility and engaging gameplay. Okay, now as far as PvP, it's just not even worth playing. I'll be honest with you. It's just not a thing. People don't PvP much anymore. Um, so if PvP is something that you're looking to do, this is not the game for you. This is a very PvE heavily focused game. But like I said, the biggest draw is the combat that PvE offers. And speaking to the hardcore player base, now there's regular content, there is elite content, there is elite plus. Most of us will, when you get up there and you get familiar with the game, most of us will just strictly run elite. For all the new content, we won't even run the regular stuff because it's almost too easy when you're maxed out. You got max artifacts. It's almost too easy. So you kind of have to run the elite version, which is a little bit harder depending on the episode, depending on the difficulty of the mechanics, things like that. And then if you really want to test yourself, you'll go into plus, and that can be kind of a headache sometimes, but it is worth the challenge if you're willing to deal with it. So if you're looking for something that is really going to push you and push your group to get on the same page and get it together, plus is kind of where you want to be. Elite is a good in between where it's hard, it's not overly hard, but it can be challenging depending on the group. Plenty of times done this one specifically and this one here where we get through it in just a few minutes, in and out, done, 15-20 minutes, no problem. But then there's a couple times where you get in there and it's just, what's going on, like people are getting smacked. So it offers something for everyone at every skill level. If you just want to play casually, you're not worried about running elite content, not a big deal. You can just run this regular stuff over and over and over again and have fun, and you never have to worry about anything. If you want more of a challenge, then yeah, elite is what you want to go for. And if you really want to feel like you're at that top percent players, then plus is where you're going to want to go. Because not everybody is cut out for elite, and definitely not everybody is cut out for elite plus. Okay, so that's not to say that there's a lot of elitism, but people know if you're ready or not for it. and they'll typically ask you for your stats before you join the group. So be mindful of that. Other than that, there is a lot of other things to do, like grinding out your skill points, so to speak, here, your stat points. So I've got 609 currently. Now, these go into your specific role, right? Whatever you're playing. And depending on the type of power you use, that may differ slightly. Really, that's more for, like, let's say the tanks. What I mean by that, so some tanks will spec dominance, and then some tanks will spec health. So it just depends on the power. And if you're unsure when you are looking at a power that you want to be, um, there's guides for that. Like I said, there's a lot of guides for that. I'm not going to go into detail on that here. I'm just kind of giving you an overview of what to expect. Let's say for healer, it's typically always the same. You're going to go into restoration. You can go into dominance after because it does help your shield. Not a big deal though. And then DPS, it just depends if you want to go precision, which is what more of the hardcore players tend to run. And then might, where you're just using your powers. When you really get enough skill points, enough artifacts and stuff like that, you don't have to relegate yourself to one or the other. You can be precision for when you want to get serious, and then you can play might when you want to just kind of chill and just run raids. Because if I'm going to be running raids for like an hour or two, I'm probably not going to want to play precision that whole time. It can be fun, but for me it gets old pretty quick. So it's something I typically only use when I'm going into the elite raids. If I'm just running anything else, I'm probably going to play might. And I have builds for both. So you don't have to necessarily choose one or the other, but you can. A lot of people do. But I prefer to have a more well-rounded approach that's going to be fun no matter what I'm doing, right? Like I said, I don't always want to play might. I don't always want to play precision. But that's an option for you, okay? So these are things to expect if you're jumping into the game in 2024. Okay, there's a lot to do as a solo player, especially as a solo player. You never have to talk to anybody in this game if you don't want to. But I would recommend it. You can make some lasting friends in this game. I still know people from like 2012, 2013, who don't even play the game anymore, but I still talk to them. You know, um, so there's a chance for new friendships, is what I'm saying. You never know what you're going to get into. Um, the leveling experience goes up to 30, 0 to 30. And, if you're fresh, you're just starting, that can actually be kind of fun. If you've done it before, over and over and over again, probably not as much, making new characters. Um, but if you're just starting, it can be kind of fun. The story missions when you're leveling, they're not so bad. They can be a little entertaining. Um, and then I believe every other year, it's not every year, but every other year, I believe, don't quote me on that. At the beginning of the year, we get the anniversary event, and sometimes they will give you a CR skip. CR is your combat rating in this game, and that's basically your gear score. So the level of your gear that you get determines the level of your character after level 30, right? So mine's at 430, so if I go and I take these eyes off, I'm at 417, right? So I put them back on, I'm at 430. So that's how you raise your combat rating, and really just playing the game will get you there. So you don't have to have a CR skip, but If you have been playing and you're thinking about running a second character or something like that, then the anniversary event, um, like I said, I think it's like every other year they'll give us a CR skip token, a combat rating skip token to advance your character from whatever level it's at, even if it's 0 up to I believe it generally only goes up to 333. So I mean, it's not bad, and I believe they give you, I want to say, like 80 skill points right off the bat. Um, so it can feel kind of grindy when it comes to skill points, but there's a lot of easy ones that you can get. Um, at minimum, you want to fill out your critical, always fill out your critical, and then you can kind of work on filling out this other stuff, right? And like I said, depending on what kind of artifacts you choose, that can really change your play style overall, and it can really affect your build very heavily. So these are things that you can kind of look forward to. Um, if this is the game you're going to jump into. There is a next gen client update that is supposed to happen within the first quarter of 2024. What all that entails, I'm not entirely sure yet. I believe there is going to be a slight graphics update. I don't expect anything huge because at the end of the day, this is a game that came out in 2011 in Unreal Engine 3. So what they can do is kind of limited, but I do expect some, upscaled textures. I believe there is going to be better performance for, PS5 and Xbox. Now, this will still run on, PS4, things like that. But we are expected to get just an overall quality of life enhancement, right? And if you join the Discords, which I do recommend joining the Discords, I have one for my channel, and then the official DC Discord, they do make the announcements whenever we are getting certain things. Like, you do get things like bonus weeks, where one week they will spotlight a certain episode. Um, if I go over here and I look, so I think we are going to be getting this raid in the spotlight next week. I'd have to go back and look, but they actually released the spotlights they're going to be highlighting for the rest of the year. All that means, spotlight just means that you're going to be getting double marks when you run this content. So typically you would get 8 or 10 marks for running a raid, but when it's a spotlight for that specific episode, you're going to be getting twice, right? So you can get 16, you can get 20. It just depends what the raid pays out. Um, and typically in those times, it's really good to go into LFG here, like you see on mine, and find a spam group. A group is that is going to be spamming that raid over and over, because you can get in and out. Some raid you can get through in 3 minutes, some you can get through in 10 minutes, and you'll want to just spam those out because you get double your marks. You get way more for your time. It pays it out. Okay, so like I said, these are what you can ideally look forward to if this is a game that you're going to jump into. So, do I think it's worth playing? Yes. Um, this is not a video I'm going to make any complaints within. I'm going to reserve that for a separate video. But as far as being new player friendly, I believe it is very new player friendly. It's come a long way over the years. I feel like they've perfected making your characters, grinding out your characters. But like I said, there are some things to say about that. But overall, it's become a very casual experience as far as leveling, playing, getting through, being a solo player, stuff like that. It can be very fun. Okay. Um, so I think it would be easy to pick up, get into, And if you're confused, there are tons of guides out there. There are a lot of helpful people in here. And then, of course, we have the Discord. You can go in and ask questions. In the Discord, there is a new player question section where you can go in and ask those questions, okay? If there's something specific that you want to know. So that is what I pretty much got for you today, guys. I wanted, like I said, I wanted to highlight what you can expect, because when you see these other videos, it's people that don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're just very casual, and they're not really giving you a true representation of the end game, because that's what you look for in an MMO, is the end game, right? Otherwise, what's the point? Unless you just want to come and cosplay, which, not, before I forget to mention, there's a lot of styles in this game. There is a lot of styles in this game, so you can get really creative with it. I think DC is the only place where you can probably get called a scrub by somebody dressed as Sonic the Hedgehog, with a guy standing next to him dressed as Zeus in sneakers. So it's a pretty interesting time. It's very fun. You can get real creative with your styles. All right. Um, but hey, that's what I got for you today, guys. So if this is the game you're interested in, that you're going to be playing, drop a comment down below. Let me know. Say hi. If you're a returning viewer, drop some comments down below for people that you think would get them into the game. Anything I may have missed, because like I said, I just kind of wanted to summarize here. So if there's anything that you wanted to uh, recommend that you think people should be looking for, that would draw them to the game, make it easier for them, stuff like that, feel free to drop those comments down below, okay? It's always appreciated. I'll catch you next time. Wooly out. Stay frosty. Peace.